Excuse me. What's up, Camille?
Hey,
Ready to film?
I guess. I'm just kind of in the middle of something.
What are you working on?
Well, I mean, take a look. It's a storage property. It's got like super low expenses. I mean, I think it's a really good deal, and I'm going to put an offer in.
You know, it's super low expenses is probably not a great thing, right?
Why?
You know what we're talking about today. I mean, we've been over this.
No, what, for Locked and Loaded?
The episode's literally about analyzing a self-storage deal.
Oh, man, that's today. Perfect timing. Well, in that case, let's get started.
We'll go through our episode, and by the end of it, you'll know whether it's deal or no deal.
From my father developing the first self-storage facility in the state of Virginia back in 1973 to becoming a trusted industry leader 4 decades later. Here at the Nicholson Companies, we've seen firsthand the changes and challenges in an industry now valued at over $40 billion, and with as many locations as corporate giants, Starbucks, McDonald's, and Subway combined. So now, with the help of Scott, Camille, and my son Edward, we're breaking industry stereotypes and sharing our knowledge, expertise, and yes, sometimes a little humor with our fellow self-storage operators to help you thrive in today's competitive self-storage industry. I'm Tom Nicholson, and this is Locked and Loaded.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us again with Locked and Loaded. And this month's episode is called Deal or No Deal. And just so you know, Camille, you had some questions earlier. I went ahead and I printed off an expense page so that you can refer to this. I have stuff prepared to talk about. That being said, please feel free to ask me any questions you have.
Okay, well, I think the first question I have is, what is the best way to find a self-storage property for sale?
Well, just so you know, I am going to try and tailor today's content towards what to do when you already have a facility in front of you, but I will answer your question because that is important. There are 4 main ways to find a self-storage facility, and you're probably doing more than one of them. In no particular order, because some are more effective than others, depending on the situation and the person. You're probably, at bare minimum, trolling online. You're probably looking at LoopNet, you're probably looking at Crexi, you're probably looking at those online websites that are like the Zillow for self-storage. Secondary, you're probably looking with a real estate agent. A million people out there, just hire someone. They find an agent and they're out there searching for product. Third, a little more unusual, but you might be looking with a wholesaler or a flipper. And then finally, if you're willing to put the time in, and I think this is the most effective way to do it, you're probably out there hitting the streets, hitting the phones, contacting owners yourself and trying to create your own deal.
Okay, well, I feel like you're going to find a lot of self-storage properties any of those ways. But you probably need to find a way to narrow it down, right?
Absolutely, and I'm glad you asked because, if you're looking at 100 facilities in a day, you don't have time to do an in-depth analysis. What I recommend that people do is create it's usually called a buy box, and what that is it's a list of criteria that you know you're looking for in your self-storage facility. It could be anything, but typically you'll say things like, you want at least 30,000 square feet of rentable square footage. You might want 30,000 people within a 5-mile radius of the facility. You might even know you want it paved. It doesn't really matter, but you want to come up with the criteria that makes sense for you so that when you look at 100 facilities, the first thing you can do is chop out 70% of them because they don't meet one of those items.
Okay, makes sense. But, now that you have figured out maybe you've got your sights set on a particular property, now what should you do? What should I be doing now at this point? I've got my sights set on this one that I was showing you.
Well, you need to understand that operations are going to be dramatically different depending on what kind of site it is and how it's currently being run. And what I mean by that is, everyone understands that there are different ways to do it, but when they're putting a value on their property as a seller, it's probably not going to mesh up with what you're doing as a buyer. And there's a million different ways. If you're purchasing from a mom and pop operator who's a little less sophisticated, you might have dramatically different numbers across the board from what a sophisticated operator like yourself, if you were selling, would. I'm going to use what I feel like is a pretty good example from here in Virginia where we're sitting. I worked on a deal a couple years ago. This was actually for one of our clients, and they were purchasing a facility. And that owner had 3 expenses. The facility was out in the country, so he paid for insurance, he paid for taxes, and he paid for electricity to keep the lights on. That is literally it. So when we looked at those expenses, they were incredibly low, kind of like what you were talking about earlier when you were looking at that deal online. They in no way matched what we as buyers were going to bring to the table.
How so? What do you mean?
Well, when you think about it, if your expenses are super low, that means your income is going to look disproportionately high, and therefore you're going to have a much higher value that you put on the property. That's what the seller's thinking. On the other hand, as a buyer, you're going to look at it and you're going to add your own expenses in. You understand that you might have 20 things that they're not, that in that example, that guy's not using. So your value on that property, because of the income being adjusted, is going to be much lower. At that point, it's an argument or a discussion trying to bridge the gap and figure out how you can come to terms that are agreeable for everyone.
Okay, so I guess it ended up affecting the overall sale price of that particular property, right?
It did, and like I said, we ended up in the middle, and sometimes it might not impact the sales price much. If it's two properties that are similar, it might not impact at all, but our whole episode here is going to be focused on when there are differences.
So it looks like there's a big expense here for marketing. I thought, if it's a small facility, they'd have a small marketing expense, but a large facility would have a larger marketing expense. I mean,
I guess
I don't know if this makes sense.
Yeah,
here.
I guess in a broad sense that's true, but particularly marketing, that's one of those items that there is no real answer. There's no correct answer. Even people who have similar facilities are going to approach marketing differently. Somebody who's been operating for 40 years, they might still be paying the Yellow Pages. Alternatively, somebody who's a newer, more advanced operator, they're probably paying for Google pay-per-click. There's a million different things that go into the marketing category, and that's probably the single line item where you'll find a biggest difference individually.
Interesting. Okay, and I'm sure it's the same with software too, because some sites they do pen and paper, and other ones use every single software that's out there, right?
Well, not only is this software just like marketing, where it's going to be all over the place, but software is also the single line item that's been changing the most over the last 10 years, mainly in the sense that it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And when you think about software, you're probably thinking about your management software, like your SiteLink or your storage or what have you.
Yeah.
There's a ton more stuff that could be in there. I mean, at our own company, we use ingrained site maps, which when you go online to rent a unit, it actually allows you to pick your unit from a map. We use StoreTrack, which pushes data on a daily basis on our competitors' rates. There's probably 15 different things that we use that are expenses that you use, but that the seller might not be using.
Interesting. Okay. And then, there is staffing. So there's staffing, the remote way, where I would assume the expenses would be less, or you could do it traditionally, higher expenses, right?
Yeah, let me run with staffing for a minute, because there's multiple different things you need to look out for here. Most people look at two different facilities, or they look at one facility for analysis, and they say, hey, this is a staffed facility. I'm going to staff it. It's probably going to be the same, right? Even in a situation like that, you might be paying your manager bonuses. You might just pay a little better. Maybe you pay a little worse. I don't know. But there could be differences there. And then again, like you just said, if you're going from a staff facility to a remote facility, or from a remote facility to a staff facility, there are going to be significant differences in who you pay for what. You're going to have to bring in some extra technology. It's all going to be over the board. It's going to be all over the board.
Yeah, and I think back to that Virginia example, that guy, didn't you say he was running the facility himself?
Yeah, you're right. I should have said that a second ago. Not only did he run the facility himself, but because he was actually the owner, he didn't put anything in for the line item of staffing at all.
Well, that makes sense. Why he only had 3 expenses now.
At the end of the day, he is paying himself, but he just wasn't doing it on paper. He was paying himself by taking all the money and not taking a salary.
I see on here, it's kind of got like a range for property insurance. I thought it was, if you're taking over a facility, you're buying it, don't you just get the same property insurance rate as what the previous owner had?
So you're asking a question that's probably based on your experience with residential transactions. And that's because within residential, you're really just trying to compare rates and deductibles. How much are you paying? And then if you have an issue, how much do you have to pay for your deductible? It's pretty straightforward. There's a possibility that you'll have something slightly different if you're live on the water or something, but it's all pretty cut and dry. Self-storage is still pretty simple, but you have all of that. Then you also have some industry-specific items that need to be added in that even an inexperienced operator might not be paying for. A perfect example of something like that is going to be your wrongful disposal of goods insurance. That is a rider that's going to add to your policy, and it kicks in where if you sell someone's items at auctions, or alternatively maybe you just throw away something you shouldn't have, and they determine that you have acted unlawfully and try and sue you, You literally have insurance that kicks in just to cover you for that specific instance.
Yeah, that's a great point and really important, because the amount of times that we've unfortunately had to auction or dispose of customers' items on the property can really be a headache, and you definitely don't want to have to deal with that on top of, being sued. So, yeah, I think it's very important that you have that rider on there. Something else I wanted to ask you, it looks like the biggest expense, or one of the biggest expenses I've noticed, is the property taxes.
And this is another one that's very important to talk about, because this is one where there's a huge misconception about property taxes. Again, I'm going to relate it to residential, because in a residential home purchase, the property taxes almost never change. And even if they do change, it's based on a regular scheduled reassessment. Commercial real estate, completely different. In most municipalities, what the county does is they trigger a reassessment at the time of the sale. What that means is, as soon as you buy that property, if you were just going off the seller's numbers for what their current property tax was, you'd be in trouble, because you know that they're going up somehow. Maybe it goes up 10%. I've seen them close to double or more. But let it be known that at some point, usually immediately, your property taxes are going to go up after a purchase.
Well, I will definitely have to keep that in mind. Are there any other major expenses you can think of that we should talk about?
Well, we are sitting in this building. How about third-party management? We work for a third-party management company, so obviously that's something you need to plan for. Not everyone's going to use third-party management, but many people choose to. So if that's the case, you need to factor that usually 5 to 6% in from the beginning.
Okay, well, I mean, you hire them after you found the facility and have bought it?
Again, you could do it that way, but the best way to do it is your third-party management company should be hired as early as possible. And once again, we work for a third-party management company, so take it with a grain of salt. But I'm saying that for a reason, and it's not just to pander our services. You want your third-party management to be involved early on, because they can actually help with this process. Not everyone's going to do it. I mean, I don't know everyone in the industry, but I know a ton. Any competent third-party management company will be able to come in and help with these analyses you're talking about. They can probably send a team, and they can do a physical analysis of the property, and they can probably do some sort of financial projection for you.
Gotcha. Well, but I'm sure that's very time-consuming and expensive. Aren't they going to charge you for it
Well,
every time you find a property you're looking at?
yes and no, and that's where you do need to be respectful of people's time and money. If you're looking at a small facility and you ask them to look at one or two, maybe you don't get charged for it, depending on what your particular relationship is. But if you're looking at a large facility and you're talking about a 2-day job with several people, there's inevitably going to be some sort of charge for it. I get it, but it's going to save you tons of time, and they're going to do it right. Also, it is worth mentioning that the way we do it and the way that a lot of our other friendly competition do it is if you end up purchasing the facility after they've done an analysis for you, then they'll waive, whether it's at the time or retroactively, the fee for doing so.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, essentially, that could be them working for free, and then you're ensuring that you make a good investment. It sounds like a win-win to me.
They're not working for free, Camille. They are working in exchange for getting the management contract. If you don't hire them, once you buy the property, you're definitely going to have a bill. But just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has really been super helpful, Ed. Thank you so much. For anyone watching that has a specific question about any part of the deal analysis process, please don't hesitate to reach out, and Ed can go into more detail about saying deal or no deal on your hunt for a storage property. We're wishing you the best of luck finding your next great purchase. Thanks for your time today, and as always, stay locked
and
loaded.